Welcome to the Simple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. I'm your host, Shannon Ables. And whether you're listening on your commute, exercising, working in the garden, or sitting down with a hot cup of tea or a cafe au lait, thank you for tuning in. Let's get started. Welcome to the 175th episode of the Simple Sophisticate. Well, today we are getting back into the French-inspired episodes. We had a ton in August, episode 167, 168, and 169 during our annual French week, but now we're back with another one. And it offers not only the episode topic, being about France or French culture, but the petit plaisir as well. It is The Petit Plaisir, a podcast. For all you Francophiles out there, you, I think, are going to love this new podcast. It's been around since last spring, so March of 2017, and I just found it this summer, and well, that's all I've been listening to when I've been walking my dogs on the weekend. So I'll tell you more about it at the end of today's episode, but today's topic is about eating and food. In fact, I'm going to share with you 14 ways to eat like the French. In other words, savoring food and the experience instead of fearing it. Let's get into it, shall we? So I want to begin with a quote from one of the many articles that I found on this topic. And it's from writer Johnny Adamek. And he says, how you eat, when you eat, for how long you eat, and with whom you eat might be more important than what you eat. Eating and enjoying real food is what matters, not tracking calories. You can kind of see where this episode's going to go, but let's get into it. As reported by Time magazine last year, while the United States unfortunately has been found to describe 34% of its population as obese, France is 10 percentage points fewer. The British Journal of Nutrition observed that a significant type of diet that was contributing to the obesity epidemic in the United States was what they coined as the sweet and processed diet. In other words, foods such as skim milk, fruit juice, breakfast cereal, and chocolates. And we'll break all of that down, what we mean by chocolates and what kind of chocolates, because oftentimes the chocolate that we're consuming has been processed and it's more sugar than actual chocolate. Much of how we approach food is based on the culture in which we were raised, and most directly, the household habits in which we lived as a child. However, the food producers and advertisers, especially in America, as you will see later in the list of ways to eat more like the French, chose to exploit the health of their consumer in order to gain profits. And thus our parents or grandparents may have fell prey to welcoming into our childhood unhealthy food tastes and habits. As shared in The Guardian, quote, all the foods that you regularly eat are ones you learn to eat, end quote. And the good news with that is since your choices were learned, you can learn new choices and unlearn the habits that do not suit a healthy body, mind, and lifestyle. I was recently speaking to a family who had just returned from a month-long visit in Italy. Sitting down to listen to them share their experiences with regards to dining and the appreciation for food and the portions served reminded me of why I appreciate the French, and as evident in their anecdote, the Italian culture as well. Food is to be appreciated, embraced, and seen as a component in how to live well. While food may not be the absolute centerpiece of our lives, it is indeed a crucial component, and to ignore such an everyday avenue to experience pleasure in the short term and a healthy long life throughout the duration of our long lives is to be ignorant of the gift food can bring. Today, I'd like to share with you 14 ways the French approach to eating and welcoming food into their lives as a way to enrich each of our appreciations and experiences with the daily detail we all balance, experience, and need. Let's get started. Number 1, step away from sugar at breakfast. As a child, I can remember having boxes of cereal in one of our kitchen shelves. However, my mom was careful to limit us to Cheerios and shredded wheat, not the sugar-laden kind, just the basic, the traditional ones. I quickly became aware of the more sugar-laden options when staying at friends' homes for sleepovers. And so when my mom would on special occasions let us purchase a sugary option, it was always Frosted Flakes. Tony the Tiger. But I do applaud my mom for being cognizant of the sugar content in our morning routine. Since then, I eat the same breakfast nearly each morning, as I shared in a particular post a few years ago. And the only sweet component is the local honey, which is why I found it eye-opening that, as shared in Michael Moss's book, Salt, Sugar, and Fat, quote, the sweet breakfast was an invention of the cereal manufacturers in the middle of the 20th century. Now, we're not just talking about cereals, though, here. Think about it for a minute with regards to breakfast meals. Pancakes with maple syrup, coffee cakes with sugar, brown sugar toppings, the crumbles. You have a lot of components when you go out to breakfast, when you go into a bakery, that are sugar-laden products, not natural sugar. We're not talking about fruit here, okay? We're talking about the sugar that you have on your counter that you cook with. We're talking about the brown sugar, the powdered sugar for topping on your pancakes and your waffles. While those are delicious foods, I eat them. I know that they are lovely. It's hard to say no to them. To start our day with that kind of a imbalance is to not feed ourselves well. We should have fiber. We should have protein. That's going to make us energized and most productive and most alert throughout the day until we get to lunch. So it's a matter of keeping that in mind. And if we need to make the shift, maybe save those special sweet occasions to once or twice a week. I know for me, I do stick to my regular breakfast every single day. However, on the weekends, I will enjoy a nice croissant with jam. I do like jam that's not too sweet. I've found that my palate has changed. And so the real sugary jams, I do definitely gravitate away from. But I also, on another special occasion, will love to have some brioche French toast. Oh my goodness, of course. So again, being aware that getting rid of sugar in breakfast is a really good idea. Number 2, mind your portions. Recently, I reviewed the newly established restaurant French Market here in Bend, and one of the reasons I enjoyed my experience, as well as the owner and chef's approach to food, was the smaller portion sizes. Each time I have dined there, my plate has been cleaned as if the chef knew exactly how much I needed to satiate my palate due to the delectable flavors. Ironically, the local newspaper just shared their review of the restaurant, and one of the negatives they pointed out in their commentary was, any guesses? The small portions. Needless to say, I wholeheartedly disagreed with them. I think smaller portions are the way to go, and it is a big shift for the American culture. Part of the reason portion sizes have grown in the United States is the food we eat doesn't truly satiate our palate. We want more. If the food is fresh, well cooked, seasoned well with herbs and spices as well as salt and pepper before, not after it is cooked, as well as not smothered in sugary sauces or tasty yet teasingly fried batter, we don't need as much food. And neither do we need a doggy bag. You may remember from episode 169, my guest Geraldine Lepierre shared in her interview that the need for a doggy bag is a poor reflection on the planning of the kitchen. They don't expect to give you a doggy bag in France, and even I found out in Italy as well. In other words, when you come to a restaurant for dinner, you are coming for one meal, not dinner and lunch tomorrow. So the goal is to give you what you need to feel satisfied and satiated in that moment and no more. As well, the bottom line of the restaurant is better able to invest in quality ingredients that will satiate their customers' taste buds rather than investing in cheap processed ingredients. So number 2 is mind your portions. 3 is welcome traditions that work. While not all traditions are worth keeping, let's go back to number 1, walk away from the sugary cereals, everybody. Some most definitely are when it comes to food. For example, tea and a small treat, either savory or sweet in the afternoon if you are in England, and eating a large lunch rather than a large dinner as is more commonly practiced in France. Why keep these traditions? Well, in each of those 2 scenarios, the body's needs are heeded without going to excess. As well, each tradition involves sitting down, savoring, and fully experiencing the food as well as the company. So number 3 is welcome traditions that work. 4, mindfully eat. The habit of being aware of what you are eating, savoring the flavors and preparation enables you to notice when food is indeed delicious and when it is not. Stop eating in the latter case. And while being mindful helps to slow down the eating process and allow time for your physiology to recognize when the body is naturally full. So number 4 is mindfully eat. Number 5, food is the common denominator, not the main attraction. A quote from nutritionist Dr. Francois Lehermet. For France, a meal is a very particular moment in which you share pleasure, the food as well as the conversation. End quote. While indeed food is an art of its own in France, it is not the reason alone you sit down to enjoy the combination of flavors and seasonal ingredients. Rather, the food enlivens the celebration and the moment of time spent with friends, family, and even strangers, depending on the situation. Now, I do eat meals alone. I will go out to a restaurant and enjoy a meal alone. But even then, I'm there to take in not just the food, the whole entire situation. If I'm in France, I'm sitting there taking in that entire environment. And if I'm sitting outside, I'm watching the Parisians and the people around me and the environment. There's so many different things that you're taking in. And so in so many ways, food is the common ground, regardless of culture, belief, or age. And what a powerful common denominator to spark conversation and help recognize that we have more in common than not, whether it's by observing or talking. So number 5 is food is the common denominator, not the main attraction. Number 6, select quality again and again and again. Quote from the blog Empowered Sustenance. They know, the French in other words, that quality food means pleasure in the short term and health in the long term. End quote. Flavor matters. If you taste a fresh, locally grown strawberry that has been sun-kissed by the warm summer heat, you don't gobble down the entire garden's worth. Rather, you share and perhaps make a tart or a shortcake or a parfait to heighten the appreciation and share with those around you. When food is top quality, we don't need much of it. And when the quality has been selected, we want to slow down and savor it, reminding our bodies to slow down as well. So number 6 is select quality again and again and again. 7, lose the negative descriptors of delicious food. For example, guilty pleasures, sinful bites, naughty concoctions. To label food in such a way is to lessen the moment of pleasure we can have when we take the first bite and the last bite of that dark chocolate mousse. Last month, I had the opportunity to have dinner at a French restaurant in Portland that I have fallen in love with called Coquine. After a lovely, seasonally perfected 3-course meal, upon paying our bill, we received something to be enjoyed as we walked back to our Airbnb. We received a hot, out-of-the-oven chocolate chip cookie with smoked almonds rolled in caramel and finished with sea salt. I've included the recipe on the show notes, so if you're curious. Now, I want to say something really quickly. I swear they weren't almonds. And this is the recipe that I found online for it. I swear they were hazelnuts or filberts, which is what Oregon is known for. And if anyone's listening who's from Portland, or if Katie, the owner, is listening, please let me know. Did you put hazelnuts in that in the middle of August? Because I swear they were hazelnuts, and I loved it. It was amazing. But this is the point of sharing that is I did not feel 1 ounce of guilt. I ate that cookie so slowly, with eyes closed and chocolate melting on my fingers and probably my face as well, that in that moment, great pleasure was indeed experienced. The difference is quality. And again, proportion plays a role as well. A savvy chef will make food for people, real humans who have a waistline and wish to keep it, but at the same time also want to taste and experience delicious food. In other words, the piece of chocolate at night will not ruin your diet. In fact, if it is quality chocolate, preferably dark chocolate, with 60% or more cacao, it will help your overall health. Eat away. Just one though, but that is all your taste buds will want. So number 7 is lose the negative descriptors of delicious food. Number 8, take your time. Eating while you drive, while you walk, while you work, while you do anything else besides talking with your dinner companions prevents not only the opportunity to be mindful of what you are eating, but also the ability for your body to recognize when it's full. Again, food is a significant component in our lives as we cultivate a way of life that is full of quality and appreciation and beautiful moments. And while food isn't the center, it shouldn't be looked at as a boorish necessity simply to fuel us. So number 8 is take your time. Number 9, prepare real food, eschew processed and invented foods. Another difference in the French approach to eating versus American and even English cultures is how often we cook our own meals. When we make our own meals, and I mean not out of a box, I mean you've got the raw, real ingredients. When we do that, we are aware of what we are eating. And when we are aware of what we are eating, we can choose to cook with food that will heighten the quality of our life rather than inundate us with, for example, constant additions of sugar that we don't even know about. And as my palate matures and I begin to seek out natural flavors and appreciate seasonal produce and the flavors that those bring, I find myself being better able to detect or notice when sugar is in food. And what I mean by that is in food that doesn't need it. There's no need for it. So even in savory food, I'm thinking, why is there sugar in this? And so what I'll do if I want to continue to have that particular type of food that is made by a producer, I will just seek out healthier options. And an example of this is, while I don't use ketchup a lot, I do have ketchup sometimes when I go and I have a breakfast at a restaurant that has potatoes or hash browns and eggs, but I do not like the sugary classic traditional ketchup that you'll find in the States. So I love using Portlandia Foods organic ketchup, and I'll provide a link to it. It is so good. In fact, it's a common staple at my hometown in Wallowa County, but I'm now seeing it here in Bend often as well. So it's just that difference, and you immediately notice that when you know what you're putting into your body, you're not putting excess anything into it because you can watch that. So just be aware of, does this food really need that ingredient? Look at the back of the label if you're buying food. And if you are trying to not buy labels, that makes it that much easier. So number 9 is prepare real food and eschew processed and invented foods. Number 10 is make the visit to the market an enjoyable ritual. One of my bi-weekly routines is visiting the farmer's market when the seasons permit and my favorite grocery stores. And you'll see a picture of my last grocery visit last week to Trader Joe's. And one of the things I'm always picking up are fresh flowers for the home. I truly do enjoy bopping into the store with my canvas bag and my list in tow and being part of the community experience of choosing food to fuel my life and savor each day. Such a concept may at first sound frivolous, and how could you enjoy such a task? But if we don't enjoy our everyday routines, what are we enjoying? Life is made up of countless conscious and unconscious routines. Why not make as many as you can, as enjoyable as you can? So number 10 is make the visit to the market an enjoyable ritual. Number 11, good fat is good for you. Yes, many have questioned the French paradox, which is that they seem to eat seemingly great food, cheeses and chocolates, and drink wine, and yet still stay healthy and thin. But while their obesity rate has inched up a bit due to outside influences, namely the United States' marketing campaigns for processed foods, they continue to eat differently by and large. In fact, 89% of the 2,600 French people studied in the British Journal of Nutrition study that I talked about at the beginning of the podcast reported eating full fat cheeses. Why does this work, and why are they still seemingly healthy with all that fat? Satiation occurs and you seek out less food to feel full. As shared by Lisa Sasson, a clinical assistant professor of nutrition at New York University's Department of Nutrition, Food Studies, and Public Health, as well as being a registered dietitian, she states the magic of the French diet, for example, is they still eat whole foods and eat more vegetables than we do. Yes, real food, not fat-free cheese. So number 11 is good fat is good for you. Number 12, keep it simple and eat the basics. Just keep it real. I was recently listening to an episode of Christopher Kimball's Milk Street Kitchen podcast, and a great piece of advice was shared about how to learn how to cook well. The advice? Master 10 to 15 recipes you love and then learn them by heart. And I do agree with this piece of advice. I think it's very savvy. And I also have found that if you master the basic concepts or skills of fundamental recipes, such as how to create the aromatics for a savory dish, how to roast vegetables, or how to make pesto, or how to create a basic sauce, you can then play with these skills and use ingredients that you have in your house at any given day. Part of the reason I made the list for my Simply Luxurious Life epicerie, there's 38 items that I recommend you have, and it's in episode 109, was so long as you have these ingredients on hand at all times, you'll be able to make any basic recipe at any given time, regardless of the season. So all you have to do, as long as you're well stocked, your epicerie is well stocked, is add the freshest seasonal ingredients that you've picked up at the market, and then all the other details that you need to make it wonderful are in your house. Knowing how to cook a simple, for example, chicken breast so that it's flavorful and moist is a dish you can make again and again and again, but you can change the flavors each time and then pair them with the freshest vegetable of that particular season. So number 12 is just keep it simple. I know we watch these shows and they do all these seemingly fancy things, but start with the basics, and that's going to give you a great foundation to cook some amazing meals. Number 13, enjoy wine as a partner to elevate the meal. Wine is a great partner for a meal when it comes to bringing out certain flavors or strengthening what's already there. They work in tandem. The wine tastes better and the food tastes better. Wine is not meant to drink alone. Wine is a partner in a meal. And you don't have to spend a lot of money on wine. Talk to your local wine purveyor or someone that you know who has tasted the wines, or if you can, go out and taste the local wines that you have in your area. And a basic bottle of white wine, a good white wine, even from France, you only have to pay $10 to $15 for. And with regards to reds, you may pay a little bit more, but not much more than that, to be honest with you. It really depends on where you live, obviously, but you don't have to pay a lot of money for great wine to bring out those flavors. So number 13 is enjoy wine as a partner to elevate the meal. Number 14, last but not least, feeling hungry is not bad for you. The French do not snack. Unless you are a child, and then after school at around 3 or 4, the children enjoy their la goûter, which is simply the snack. Allowing yourself to feel hungry, not starving, not famished so as to be fatigued, but hungry is a good sign. In fact, when I wake up in the morning, I hope I do feel hungry, as it means my body is ready to eat, rather than just eat because it is time to enjoy petit déjeuner. How can you ensure you don't become hungry too soon? Eat well when you do sit down for meals. Eat well-balanced, yet satiating foods. Enjoy eating. Take your time and be aware of what you are eating and let go of feeling guilty about eating. An important part of the process of developing eating habits that work for us and feed our bodies well is to pay attention to how the food we eat makes us feel. Case in point, at Coquine, the restaurant I spoke about earlier, the meal that I had was simply a 3-course meal, and it began with a brioche shrimp toast as an appetizer. Then the entree was poached Monterey Bay squid, and then black cod. We had 2 dishes for 2 people. And then the dessert was bene seed pavlova for dessert. I wasn't full, but I was absolutely satisfied. And the cookie to enjoy on the walk home, as mentioned earlier, added a sweet punctuation of deliciousness to finish the night. The flavors were thoughtful, and the evening was memorable due to the company, the ambiance of decor and fellow guests, as well as the knowledgeable waitstaff. So number 14 is feeling hungry is not bad for you. And if you want, you can actually go to the show notes and see an image that I shared on Instagram of the entrees that we had that night. So you can get an idea of the portion sizes as well as the ingredients, if you can discern those, which I think you probably can quite easily. Fearing food is to fear life. Food is what gives us life, or if thoughtlessly approached, is what can shorten our lives. Why not discover the basic tenets of good eating and come to understand the simply luxurious approach to food, which is inspired by the French culture: quality over quantity and never deprivation, only moderation. I'll provide on the show notes a handful of posts that will help you get started when it comes to eating well and how to dive into navigating all of this information, or just simply reaffirm what you already know. We'll talk about how to cook. We'll talk about how to feed your body well, how to keep it simple in the kitchen, and 10 ways to simply live healthier, which incorporates a lot of ways to approach food. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode and the topic. There's a bunch of links you might want to check out, and you can visit the show notes for those, the simplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast 175. But now we have a petit plaisir that I think you're going to enjoy if you already enjoy the French culture. I'll be right back with this week's petit plaisir. Welcome back. So this week's petit plaisir is a Parisian podcast to listen to tout de suite. It is called the Earful Tower. Yes, you heard me correctly. Ha ha. Sorry. I think the title tells you a lot about what this podcast is. It is, yes, absolutely about Paris. You're going to love how informative it is. You're going to be making lists and ideas of things that they share, but it's also very playful. And I love that about this podcast. So let me get into how I came to find it. In fact, I can't really tell you that because I don't know how I came across it, but I did come across it or find it and tweet it out actually to my Twitter followers during French Week, so about a month ago. And I am just glad I did come across it. I honestly can't remember how I found it. I think I found it on Facebook and one of the people I follow mentioned it, but it is lovely. Oliver G., his name is G-E-E, but he pronounces it the letter G, is an Australian freelance writer who has now called Paris home for just over 2 years. And he is the host of this newly minted podcast, which is produced by World Radio Paris. And each week they bring you interviews with guests such as, I just listened to this one today on my walk, with pastry chef, writer, and blogger David Leibovitz. And they also, and I listened to this one on Friday, the author of The Only Street in Paris, Elaine Sciolino. Also, blogger of Lost in Cheeseland, Lindsay Tramuta, and that is just a sampling. They have almost 30 episodes right now, and there's still new ones coming. I look forward to listening to them all. And in all honesty, the gem of the podcast is Oliver, the host. While yes, his voice, as you will hear when you tune in, is indeed made for radio, it becomes quickly apparent that he is invested in Paris. He is willing to try just about anything. I encourage you to check out a few of the videos on Facebook. He's just fun and engaging, as well as ask a guest just about anything as well. The Earful Tower has been my podcast of choice these past few weeks as I transition back into school and teaching. And it is an escape that I enjoy as I get to learn more about the ambiance and the nuances of Paris. And it's an exquisite treat for the senses. Yes, I said more than one sense, because Oliver does his best to bring the food and flavors to this audio podcast. For example, in episode 3, Tom Clark, who is the owner of a coffee house in Paris, after talking about the cultural shift with regards to coffee in the City of Light, Oliver has Clark blind taste test a handful of different coffee options. As well, his guest, David Leibovitz, also was run through a blind taste test of varying food options. Now, the conversation with each guest is, like I said, playful but unique. It's also informative and, in all honesty, quite precisely what I have longed for when it comes to Parisian escape podcasts. An opportunity to deepen my knowledge of the Parisian culture, lengthen my list of places to see and things to do, as well as get to know those with expertise about the City of Light. Each episode runs about 30 minutes, and the production quality is superb. And while entirely in English, you may just learn a few French words here and there, as the producer on set, James, is, as they continue to remind listeners, half French. I couldn't think of better guests for next summer's 3rd annual French Week. Can you? Hopefully we can get them on this show. I think you guys would really enjoy them. But you're going to get to know them before that because you're going to go check them out on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you get your podcasts. They are wonderful. I'll provide a link to their podcast and the website and all their social media sites so you can check them out. And you can find all those links on today's show notes, the simplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast 175. Again, that's the Earful Tower podcast. This week's Petit Plaisir. I hope you've enjoyed this week's Petit Plaisir, where each week ideas are shared to make the everyday all the more enjoyable. Tune in at the end of each Monday's podcast, where I'll recommend a book, a film, or a recipe, anything that is a simple pleasure to satiate your sophisticated taste. Now, before we wrap up today, I want to take a moment to give a little shout out to a review that was posted about this podcast, The Simple Sophisticate. It is from Raven Firebrand, and she writes, "As a Francophile and someone aspiring to a simpler yet higher quality way of living, I've been listening to Shannon's podcast for over a year now, probably closer to 2. And after all this time, one thing always remains true. When finishing any episode, I always feel lifted, happier, lighter than when I began. Whether the topic at hand is a more surface issue of refining your wardrobe or tackling your inner world, goal setting and the like, Shannon has a positive and realistic take on these issues. She always stresses quality and self-improvement, but I never feel like I'm striving for some unreachable level of perfection. Because at the end of the day, the message is always this: being happy with who you are and where you're at. Thank you, Shannon. You always bring a little sunshine into my day when I need it." I also recommend her website for little eye candy and relaxing pick-me-up. Perfect Sunday morning lounging around reading. I cannot thank you more, Raven Firebrand. You have said such kind words, and I am truly humbled. I want to thank you for taking the time to write such a detailed review. And if you too enjoy The Simple Sophisticate, it really does mean a lot, and you could hear your review potentially on a future episode. But even if you just want to rank it with regards to the stars, you don't have to leave a written review. You can do that really quickly as well. So thank you again, Raven Firebrand. I have more reviews I want to share in coming episodes, and maybe one of those will be yours. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, and have a wonderful start to this week that will end with fall's beginning, or if you're an Aussie reader, a New Zealand reader, or anyone in the Southern Hemisphere, the beginning of spring. Thank you for tuning in to the Simple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. For more ideas and inspiration throughout the week, stop by the blog, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com, or pick up the book, now available on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon, as well as in paperback, Choosing the Simply Luxurious Life, A Modern Woman's Guide. To stay caught up on the most recent episodes of the podcast, blog posts, and to receive exclusive news as well as an extra dose of inspiration to start your weekend, subscribe to the Simply Luxurious Life's weekly newsletter, which arrives in your inbox each Friday morning to enjoy with a hot cup of tea or a hot cup of coffee. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Shannon Ables. À la prochaine.